On behalf of everyone at Canby Financial Advisors and our three guest speakers, I would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Chris Borden, and I am a financial advisor and managing partner for Canby Financial. When Americans think about retirement, we visualize a life without schedules. We're free to pursue our hobbies, enjoy the fruits of our lifetime of labor. At least that's the dream. However, while we hope you are living the dream during retirement, older adults will be faced with a myriad of complex decisions. Today's speakers will help us identify the choices we will face as we grow older. These choices can cause stress and uncertainty, and we hope today's webinar will improve your peace of mind as these decisions arise. Our three guest speakers are experts in their fields. Michelle Woodbury will discuss senior living options. Michelle Gucciardi will provide an overview of Medicare, and Kathleen Summers will discuss end-of-life estate planning decisions. Let's start with Michelle Woodbury. Michelle is co-founder and senior care consultant with Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors. She'll be discussing the various senior living options available, from receiving care at home to independent living, assisted living, and continuing care retirement communities. In 2011, Michelle and her sister Allison launched Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors to consult with families to develop comprehensive and manageable plans for successfully finding and maintaining care.
So as Chris mentioned, my name is Michelle. My sister Allison and I are in our 14th year of business, working with families like yourselves to understand what senior living options are available to them. One of the things that I have found in all these years is that people spend quite a bit of time. People who do the planning spend quite a bit of time planning for their active retirement, and they spend time planning for what is going to happen to their stuff after they pass away. But not that many people plan for that in between, and not just financially, but logistically. So that's where I come in. And so what I was saying is I think a lot of people plan for what happens when they retire, and they make plans for what happens when they pass away. But identifying what you want to have happen in the event that you need care and you're not actively retired, but you haven't passed away yet. There are goals that you can establish. In all the years that I've been doing this, I've really only come across 5 goals. And if there are any others that I haven't thought of yet, I'm always open to broadening this list. But the 5 goals, and I would say this is in order. Most people want to spend the end of their life at home. They want to stay home. That's a goal. It's an express goal. Second to that, people express that they want to avoid ever having to go to a nursing home. That's the second most common express goal. Couples tend to say that they want to stay together. Families will mention preserving assets to pass along to future generations, or potentially if they have a special needs child. And then a lot of people talk about not wanting to be a burden on their family. And actually, by contrast, some people say that they do expect their family to take care of them. But either way, there's a conversation that needs to happen around being a burden. I use a lot of metaphors and analogies, and what I like to talk about is a road trip. So let's say we're here in Massachusetts and we want to travel across the country. Very, very few people would just get in the car and start driving. It doesn't make sense to do that because we know that we might get lost. There's so many variables. So we sit down and we look at how far away are we going? Do we have enough gas? Do we have money for gas to get there? Do we have reliable transportation, or can we anticipate that our car might break down halfway through? Is there weather that we might anticipate? And should we take the southern route versus the northern route? There's a number of different things that we want to take into consideration to make sure that we can make it to our destination. If we are planning to go to California from here and we don't get there, we may end up in the middle of Kansas. Now, I don't want to put Kansas down, but there's really not a whole lot there for me anyway. I want to be in a more active place near a coast. So am I going to set out to go to California knowing that like the chances are pretty good that I actually won't make it there at all? Or do I want to rethink my plan before I set out on the road trip? And I can't answer that for anybody else, except for me. I would want to rethink my plan and not aim to get to California and risk being stuck somewhere in the middle of the country that I don't want to be. And the same is true with senior care planning. People want to stay home. If the express goal is to stay home, that's California. And what most people do is they just set out on their journey. I'm going to stay home, but they haven't calculated all the or considered all the variables that might come into play that affect whether they can or cannot achieve that goal. Sometimes it can be determined ahead of time that the goal is not achievable or very likely not achievable, that particular goal. But that doesn't mean that there are not other goals to have in mind, or even a backup plan. If you know your car very likely might not make it all the way, then you can have a plan to get a new car halfway, or rent a car, or get on a bus. There's a number of workarounds, but I think that it's helpful to know ahead of time what you might expect. The criteria that we take into consideration when we are helping families look at what senior care options are the best fit for them are care needs. And it's tricky because we don't have a crystal ball. And unless if somebody has a diagnosis of some kind, then we can make some reasonable predictions about what their care needs might be. But without a diagnosis or any significant health concerns, we can only make a general predictions. But we can consider what our care needs might be, what our budget looks like, what location is preferable. Do you want to move to your kids, or do you want to stay where you are? And then, excuse me, other non-negotiables. So for example, I have a client. I'm so sorry. I have a client right now that's a vegetarian, a vegan actually, and finding a senior living community that can accommodate that diet is a non-negotiable. That's not something that they're willing to or able to give up. But there are a number of those things that people have. Not everybody has one, but these are the criteria that we have to like process in order to figure out what senior care options are going to be the right fit. Next slide. Here are the options. I come across in my practice a lot of people who they might know that there are different types of options, but in their mind, they're thinking home or nursing home. If I don't stay home, then I have to go to a nursing home. And the fact is that there's a lot else. If you are staying at home, then downsizing is still a good idea, even within your home. Sort of just making your living space less cluttered, and then it makes it easier to prepare for your family too. Home health care, we talked about. There are adult day health programs, senior housing, which is income-based. CCRC stands for Continuing Care Retirement Community. Independent living, which is a rental model of residential senior living, assisted living, memory care, nursing home, and hospice. And many families, including my own, will utilize some of or all of these things. I tend to talk about my parents a little bit. My dad is 84 and has had Parkinson's for the last 20 years or so, and has utilized many of these options. There are three types of options in Massachusetts. This is extremely oversimplified, ridiculously oversimplified. But for the basis of understanding how all this works, there are three types of options. One of them is home with support. And that's bringing care in, it's modifying the home, it's making sure the support system's there, meal preparation, grocery delivery, all of the things that are needed in order to make home successful. The second category is what I call private pay, community living options. So that includes the assisted living communities, the continuing care retirement communities, the independent living communities, memory care. And I'm planning to touch upon each one of those things just a tiny bit. But if I don't have time, then you can certainly reach out to me, because this is the focus of my practice is really helping people understand the differences between all of these options. But to go back to my very oversimplified explanation, we have home with support. We have our private pay options, which pretty much is anywhere that if you run out of money, you need to move out. And then the last category is nursing home care. So in terms of the three options, we have home, private pay, and nursing home. There are only two reasons from where I sit that somebody needs to live in a nursing home. Nursing homes are clinical. They're a step down from a hospital. Somebody in a nursing home has a bed in a room. Most of the time it's semi-private and there's a curtain in the middle. Nursing homes do two things. Most do both. One of them is short-term rehab and the other is long-term care. Rehab might occur for any number of reasons. And what I'm talking about today is not including rehab. But long-term, why does someone live in a nursing home? Nursing homes are less than ideal. Even the nicest ones, and there are some nice ones, it's still obvious that it's not a home-like environment. It's a clinical environment. Assisted living, by comparison, is more of a residential community where people rent apartments. They're not medical models of care. And but services are provided, like help with getting dressed and going to the bathroom and managing medications. But skilled nursing isn't available. So there's only two reasons why somebody would have to live in a nursing home versus an assisted living or staying at home. One of those reasons is if their care needs cannot be met in any other setting. This is not a black and white answer. There are assisted living communities fall in a spectrum, and some assisted living communities can do almost everything a nursing home can do, with the exception of things that by regulation only a nursing home can do. And the most common of those is injections. If somebody is diabetic and they can't manage their own insulin injections or blood sugar checks, then they really can't, their care can't be managed in an assisted living. But feeding tubes, respirators, ventilators, significant care needs that require a skilled nurse around the clock, that has to be managed in a nursing home environment. But there are people in assisted living who require 2 certified nursing assistants to get in and out of bed, to get dressed, to go to the bathroom, that need assistance in eating. There are very, very high level of care assisted living communities. But the other reason why somebody needs to live in a nursing home is if they don't have the finances to pay privately in any other setting. So if somebody runs out of funds and they cannot afford the care they need either at home or in an assisted living, then they will qualify for Mass Health. And this is where I imagine the other speakers are going to get into a little bit more. Mass Health is not my area of expertise, but I do know that when somebody goes on to Mass Health and moves into a nursing home, all of their expenses are covered. The nursing home will take all of their income except for $72.80 each month. But they no longer need They don't have expenses of co-pays or insurance or utilities or food or anything. Everything's covered. So the two reasons why somebody needs to live in a nursing home is because their care needs can't be met anywhere else. So I don't actually have time to go into all of these, so we'll just skip over them. But again, please reach out to me if you want more detail on how all of these options play together. So we have home health, as I mentioned. Senior housing is income-based. There's a very long wait list. If you think you might benefit from income-based senior housing at any point in the future, get on the wait lists. You can always say no if they have an apartment and you're not ready and you don't want it, but do yourself a favor and get on the wait list if you think you're going to need it. CCRCs are continuing care retirement communities. These are the communities that you buy into, and then you move from independent living to assisted living to the nursing home. But they require an entrance fee. Independent living is a rental model, so it's different. You don't have to, there's no entry fee, but there's a month-to-month rent, and it usually includes some meals, whether it's 1, 2, or maybe 3 meals a day, housekeeping activities, wellness checks, but there's not care included in that. Adult day health is a means to an end for a lot of people who are trying to stay at home, or they're trying to keep a spouse at home, but it's difficult because they have declining, their cognition is declining. Then they may benefit from going to an adult day health program during the day. These are often covered by Mass Health, so it can help offset the cost of somebody's care when it gets to be quite high. And I mentioned this a few minutes ago, that assisted living is a spectrum. The assisted livings fall anywhere in this spectrum. Some are very independent and they don't do a whole lot of care, and others are do almost as much as a nursing home, but they are private pay. Assisted living, the cost is based on two things. One is rent, and that includes, room and board basically, and the second is care. It's not this crystal clear. Some places include some care, and some are a la carte, some are in packages. But generally speaking, assisted living in Massachusetts on average is about $6,500 per month. It varies a lot based on location and based on care needs, and the community that you choose. There are some places that are, I have clients that are paying as around $3,500 or $4,000 a month, and then I have people that are paying upwards of $25,000 or $30,000 a month. And so but generally $6,500. Memory care is a type of assisted living. Some of them are freestanding, all memory care, and some of them are part of an assisted living, but it's a secure environment so that people who lack the safety awareness to be on their own for any length of time can receive the oversight and the supervision and support they need. Memory care is a little bit more expensive than traditional assisted living, for a number of reasons, but higher staffing ratios are one. I would say about $7,500 a month for a memory care apartment. Rest homes are kind of a combination or a hybrid between assisted livings and nursing homes. There are not very many rest homes. Skilled nursing communities do both things, short-term and long-term care. And the two reasons why somebody would need to live in a nursing home is if medically they qualify. Financial eligibility plus care needs equals nursing home on Mass Health. So if somebody doesn't have the care needs, or they have the finances to pay privately, there's a really good possibility that I can help them find an option that is nicer than a nursing home typically is. And that's something that people don't realize when they're doing this, their estate planning, and they're thinking there's a lot of planning for Mass Health and for nursing home care. But we can look at the other side of the coin and identify what is the goal. If the goal is to stay out of a nursing home, then the planning that you do can reflect that. And that's where my knowledge of how all these different options is beneficial, but ultimately, having an understanding of what your goal is, what your personal goal is, helps you put the professionals and the resources in place to meet that goal. Hospice is not necessarily a place. It's a benefit you can take advantage of anywhere somebody lives, and it's covered by Medicare. So we're going to go back to our road trip again, and we're planning to head out west, and we're planning to stay home. The factors that we need to sit down and consider ahead of time are what care needs can we anticipate. And similar to heading out on the other side of the country, like we don't know what weather we're going to run into, but we can know that if we're going through certain places like the South right now, that we might run into hurricanes. The chances are that we might run into a hurricane, so we can plan or at least have a backup for that. Finances, location preferences, and then other hot buttons. And think about what would you want to have happen if you need care support, and then figure out how to plan for that. So just to close up, I am local from Sharon. My dad, who I mentioned earlier, is 84. He's had Parkinson's for about 20 years. He ran nursing homes. He was a nursing home administrator and then built assisted living communities and nursing homes. And so I didn't go to daycare. My sister and I grew up going to nursing homes. Our company is 14 years old, and we take all of this information and help families understand. So that is a very quick overview of not just the senior living options themselves, but the planning aspect of identifying what it is that you want to have happen, and then putting a plan in place specifically for that goal.
Thanks, Michelle. I like the analogy of retirement living, assisted living as a road trip, and making those decisions based on your resources and then planning for it. And it's also important that when you find a spot that you like, and you should be on the lookout for that, to put a deposit down and get on the waiting list. So thanks for those tips and your information.
Thank you.
Our second speaker this afternoon is Michelle Gucciardi. Michelle was the presenter at a very popular webinar we held on Medicare. Today, she'll be conducting an abbreviated version of that webinar, focusing on what seniors can change during the special fall and winter Medicare enrollment periods. She'll also highlight important changes to Medicare prescription drug coverages that may lower out-of-pocket costs. Michelle is a program coordinator with Metro West Shine, which stands for Serving the Health Insurance Needs of Everyone. Shine is a free state service that connects people with experienced Medicare consultants so they can make appropriate Medicare choices. I'm turning it over to you now, Michelle.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back here presenting with Canby. So my presentation, as Chris said, is going to be on Medicare today. Medicare can certainly be a mystery to many people, especially retirees who were accustomed to commercial health insurance through their employer. So Medicare might be a foreign concept, but understanding Medicare is really integral to ensuring that you can access the health care that you need at a cost that you can afford. So that's where the Shine program comes in. So my name is Michelle Gucciardi. I am the program coordinator of Metro West Shine. Shine stands for Serving the Health Insurance Needs of Everyone on Medicare. We're a federally funded program. So our program is overseen at a federal level by the Administration for Community Living, or ACL, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. On a state level, our program is administered by the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Our mission is to provide free, unbiased health insurance information, counseling, and assistance to Massachusetts Medicare beneficiaries of all ages and their caregivers. And I want to just take a moment to explain what the distinction is between what we do and what insurance brokers do. So insurance brokers are not obligated to tell you about all of your Medicare options, and insurance brokers may receive a commission based on the plan that they enroll you in. On the flip side, Shine has no financial stake in the plan that you choose. Our goal is really to provide information to you about all of your options so that you can make an informed decision that is best for you. Our program has 13 regional offices that cover the entire state of Massachusetts. I am the director for the Metro West region. We're based in Needham, and we cover 22 cities and towns between Brookline and Westboro. But statewide, there are about 650 Shine counselors, most of whom are volunteers. And you can access our counselors. The best way to get an appointment with a counselor is by calling the local senior center and talking to them about setting up an appointment with the Shine counselor. The presentation I'm going to give is a very condensed version. I'm not going to get to everything that I'd like to share about Medicare. So I really would encourage you, if you'd like to learn more, sit down with one of the Shine counselors and have a personalized meeting with them. And there are programs like ours in all 50 states. So if you have a loved one or a family member or friend who lives in another state, there is an equivalent program in their state that can help them with their Medicare options as well. So how Shine can help. So what do we do? So again, we educate people about all of their health insurance options. We assist Medicare beneficiaries to understand their rights and benefits under Medicare, and also Mass Health. We do work with Medicare beneficiaries who are also on Mass Health, answering questions and helping with eligibility for Mass Health programs as well. And everyone that we meet with, we're going to screen them to see if there's any state or federal public benefit programs that they might benefit from that would help them defray some of the costs of Medicare, which can be rather expensive. So we talk to everyone and say, you know, if you're willing to share your income with us, we can tell you if you might qualify for something that would help with the cost of Medicare. So what is Medicare? Many of you on this call might already be familiar, but Medicare is the federal health insurance program that helps with the cost of health care. But it's not meant to be comprehensive. It was never meant to be comprehensive health insurance. It was not designed to cover all medical expenses, and we'll talk about what some of the gaps are of original Medicare. It's not meant to cover the cost of long-term care either. Michelle talked a little bit about long-term care nursing home coverage. Medicare doesn't cover that. Mass Health, as she said, may cover that for you. There are different parts of Medicare that help cover specific services. So Part A is going to cover hospital insurance. So we think of that as if you are admitted to the hospital or admitted to a facility, it's typically going to fall under Part A. Part B is medical insurance. That I think of that as sort of doctor's insurance or outpatient services. Anything that is essentially outpatient is going to fall under Part B for the most part. And then Part D is prescription drug coverage, D for drugs. That was added on to original Medicare back in 2006. So when I say original Medicare, I'm referring to A and B together. That's what we refer to as original Medicare. Now you might be thinking, where's Part C here? Part C is also known as a Medicare Advantage plan. And we don't think of it as a unique part of Medicare. A C plan typically just combines the benefits of A, B, and D all rolled together, but it's not its own unique part. So CMS and Medicare consider it just three parts, A, B, and D, C being just a combination of A, B, and D altogether. Okay, so in terms of the cost of original Medicare, I was really hoping that by the time of this presentation, CMS would have released the 2025 Medicare cost information, but as of a few hours ago when I checked the website, they have not. So all I can share with you is the most recent information that we have, which is the 2024 figures. Medicare Part A premium is free for most people. Typically, if you've worked about 10 years and paid into the system for about 10 years, you're going to get Medicare Part A for free. Part A has a hospital deductible. So if you're admitted to the hospital, you would pay the first $1,632. And we do expect that to go up a little bit for 2025. And there's also coinsurance if you're in the hospital more than 60 days, or if you're in a skilled nursing facility for more than 20 days. The Part B standard premium for 2024 is $174.70 a month. We do expect that to go up. Experts have estimated that it may come in around $185 a month for Medicare Part B for 2025. I'm hoping that they're going to release those numbers very soon, but historically, they have released them in the past as late as early November. So we may still have a few more weeks before we learn exactly what the 2025 Medicare premiums are. The Part B deductible is currently $240, and we expect that to go up a little bit, probably in the ballpark of $255, $260 for 2025. The Part D premiums, you'll see for 2024, I have a range of Part B premiums between 50 cents and $155.80. The D premiums have already been released for 2025, and the range of those are now going to be $12.40 to $190.80. This is also the IRMA. This is the IRMA chart here. So again, this has not yet been released for 2025. This is the 2024 version. IRMA stands for the Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. And this is the amount that higher income earners will pay for their Part B premium. If you make more than a certain threshold, you're going to pay more than the standard premium for Part B, B as in boy, and you'll also pay an additional amount on top of your Part D premium as well. So as you can see here, for example, for 2024, if you as an individual made more than $103,000 and less than $129,000, then you would pay $244.60 for your Part B premium instead of the standard $174.70. So again, in the next few weeks, they're going to be releasing these updated numbers for 2025, and we do certainly expect them to go up a little bit. Remember that to determine the Part B premium, Medicare always looks back at your income from 2 years prior. So if you're on Medicare Part B in 2025, they're going to look at your 2023 income to determine what your premium is going to be. And also keep in mind that if you have had a life-changing event in the interim, you can always appeal the IRMA. So if you are assessed to be at a certain income bracket based on your earnings from 2 years ago, but 6 months ago you retired and now your earnings are going to be a lot lower for this year, you can appeal that IRMA and ask Medicare to basically just look at what your current earnings would be and not to look at your earnings from 2 years ago. But again, that is, you're required to have had a life-changing event in order to make that request. So the Medicare coverage choices, once you are on Medicare, there are basically 2 options that you have to choose from, and it's either one or the other. You can't pick a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. It's one or the other. So the first path that many people choose is to go with original Medicare. That's just your Part A and your Part B. To add on to that, a standalone drug plan, and then also a Medigap supplement plan. The other option is a Medicare Advantage plan. So these take the form of an HMO or a PPO. Again, those are those Part C plans that include your A, B, and D all kind of rolled into one. And those are sold by companies like Tufts, Aetna, United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you have to, so the folks that are on Medicare are choosing either one of these options. So that's why this time of year is very important. This is Medicare open enrollment time. So this is when folks who are on Medicare already can make a change to their plan. So they could, if they were on option 1 before, during this time of year, they can switch over to option 2 or vice versa. So it's the time of year when everyone who's on Medicare can and should review their plan options, compare if they could find more cost-effective coverage or better coverage elsewhere, and then make that change if they choose to do so. And this is in regards to your Part C plan, those Medicare Advantage plans, those HMOs or PPOs, or your standalone Part D prescription drug plans, your plans that just cover drugs. So if you're on Medicare, this is the time of year, it's just started a few days ago, to check your plan for, make sure it's going to work for you for next year. Just as a reminder, Medicare open enrollment begins on October 15th and ends on December 7th, and any change that you make during that time goes into effect on January 1st. So again, why is open enrollment important? Why do we really stress that everyone should check their coverage at this time of year? Your health needs may change. You may have gotten a new diagnosis since last year, and so you might have different prescriptions or be seeing different specialists than you were last year, or expect there might be a higher likelihood you're going to go in the hospital next year. The plan that you were on may change significantly as well. Even if nothing has changed about your situation, the plan that you were on may change. Some people say, well, I don't need to check my plan. I'm really happy with it. But then I say, well, do you understand how it's going to change for next year? So you really do have to check that because the plans can change so much from year to year. And then also the providers that have contracts with these plans, specifically the Advantage plans, can change from year to year as well. So it's really important not just to save money, but also just to ensure that you have the appropriate coverage that you need. So it's not just all about saving money, although that is a big part of it for many folks. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the Medicare Part D changes that resulted from the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, because these have been in the news a lot lately, and I kind of want to address these a little bit here. So in 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, and that made some very significant changes to Medicare Part D coverage. In 2025 is the year that many of those changes are going to be implemented. Medicare Part D coverage has been redesigned and now has eliminated the coverage gap or the donut hole phase. So this is the phase of year when folks would typically pay higher amounts for their drugs. Relatedly, there's now a $2,000 out-of-pocket spending limit for drug costs. Again, this is because of the Inflation Reduction Act. And because of these changes, we're strongly encouraging everyone to review their Part D coverage for next year. That's because with all these changes, what many of the plans have responded by doing is increasing their premiums. Some plans have been terminated completely. Some companies have left the market completely. So folks are going to need to get other coverage. Or there are sort of more hidden costs that are kind of going up that you might not necessarily notice at first glance. Like the cost of your drug at the pharmacy might be going up. So I think it's really important that you see the whole picture. Ultimately, the $2,000 cap is going to be good for folks on Medicare drug coverage, but it's the program is really in flux this year, and it's really important to double check that your plan is the best one for you. There's also now an option to smooth out your drug costs throughout the year, instead of having your drug costs sort of front-loaded in the beginning of the year. And they're calling this the Medicare Prescription Payment Plan. So it's not a money-saving tool, but it just allows you to spread out your costs over the course of the year so that might be more manageable for folks versus having, many of your costs kind of front-loaded in January and February, such as when you're paying a deductible in the first few months. So again, ultimately, hopefully a good thing for folks on Medicare, a good option. I want to address the question about creditable employer drug coverage. So as you may know, you can delay your Medicare Part D coverage while you're working as long as you have creditable drug coverage from another source, such as your employer. And remember, creditable drug coverage means coverage that is as good as or better than Medicare's drug coverage. So what we have been, keeping an eye on is that obviously Medicare Part D is changing so much with that new out-of-pocket cap of $2,000. And now what folks are noticing is, well, how are these employer plans going to stack up now against Medicare? Are they going to be considered as good as Medicare now that Medicare's coverage has sort of gotten so much better, if you will? So in response to this, CMS has made a decision to basically delay the enforcement of this new criteria for credibility until at least calendar year 2026. So essentially for calendar year 2025, they're going to use the old criteria, the 2024 criteria, to determine if an employer drug coverage is considered creditable. So in that sense, they're kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, but so no one on an employer plan should have to worry about their plan suddenly no longer being creditable for the year 2025. Now, when it does come closer to 2026, CMS is going to issue more guidance and more criteria for plans about how to judge whether they are considered creditable or not. So at least until 2026, this won't be an issue for folks. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to stick around for the Q&A, and I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Michelle. As we've just heard, Medicare is complex and it's changing. The regulations change out of Washington, D.C. And in Massachusetts, we're very fortunate to have the SHINE organization, and we advise our clients to take advantage when they have that, and it's something you got to look at every year. So, thanks again for your comments, Michelle. Our final speaker is Kathleen Summers. Kathleen is a registered nurse and elder care estate planning attorney and partner with Generations Law Group. As a nurse attorney with over 30 years of legal experience, Kathleen concentrates her legal practice on estate planning, long-term care, and guardianship, which are the topics she'll be covering today. Kathleen is often sought out by professionals to serve as an advisor to local hospitals and is the immediate past president of the Massachusetts chapter of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. Take it away, Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Canby, for having me. And to the two Michelles, I mean, there's one thing I have learned over the 30 years is that I'm constantly learning. And so thank you so much for sharing all of that information. As Chris said, the one consistency is change, and that's always something that we're dealing with in this area. I'd like to talk today about estate planning, but I really want to focus today because most of the times when people think about estate planning, they think about what's going to happen after I have died. And certainly that's a very critical part of estate planning, looking at things like how to avoid estate taxes, legacy planning, family harmony, income tax planning, all of that. But what I really want to focus on today is the aspects of estate planning that affect us while we're still alive. And that's a part of estate planning that oftentimes people don't understand really are a focus and should be a focus as part of your overall planning. So one of the things I wanted to just begin with is understanding what your estate is, because oftentimes people will say to me, well, I don't understand what I have in my estate or why I need to do planning. And when we're looking at our estates, we're looking at many different aspects. Certainly, money value that you have in your estate. So savings accounts, checking accounts, retirement accounts, investments, stocks, all of those types of things are part of kind of the money, the cash that we have to be looking at for planning. If you have life insurance, certainly that's a value that helps to cover cost oftentimes after someone has died, but life insurance can also have real value, face value, or cash value that could be tapped in if necessary while you're still alive. Planning also talks about how to deal with real estate that you may have, your home, whether it be your primary home, a secondary home, businesses that you may be involved in, and your personal property, talking about what to do with, as I say, your stuff, including, and an interesting thing, your pets. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about that too, because that is an aspect of planning while we're still alive that oftentimes gets overlooked. So again, in traditional estate planning, things that we take a look at oftentimes are avoiding probate, minimizing it or eliminating it completely, making sure that we have a plan that passes on value and ideals to, as part of our legacy planning to the next generation. Gifting while we're alive, or certainly bequests after we have died to make sure we're taking care of the people that we love and are important to us, as well as charities. But again, the thing I really want to focus on today is that care of self. How do we make sure that during our life, if we lose the ability to be able to manage things for ourselves, how do we make sure that our needs are still met, that our wishes are known and followed? So it's making sure that if we have moments of incapacity, if our illness becomes such that we can no longer make decisions for ourselves, how do we make sure that those are being made for us in the framework that we want them to be handled? And I'm going to touch a little bit on asset protection as well, even though this is not a seminar about mass health planning. It's certainly part of planning for the aging process. So some of the things to consider You know, if you have an old estate plan, one that you have not looked at in a while, you know, I always joke the things that we put in possibly when we were, you know, maybe in our 30s or 40s and raising our families, et cetera, those plans change dramatically over the years. And as we age and as our needs change and as our family situations change, we need to make sure that our plans are living and breathing and that they change with us and that they reflect our needs and wants and our desires in real time. When we look at asset holdings, some of the things we look at is how are assets held for you? You know, oftentimes people say, well, I have a jointly held asset with my spouse. That's wonderful. It's a great way of avoiding probate. And, you know, on the first of you to die, things will pass on to that joint owner. If you have, let's say, a child on an account, et cetera, because you want them to be able to help pay bills, that can be a positive, but it also can be a negative. And we want to take a look at how assets are held, and we want to understand what control that joint owner and what access that joint owner may have, particularly in the situation in which we might lose competency or capacity. What kind of access is there, and do we want that access there? And is it going to give them the full breadth of you know, access to the asset that we had intended? If we're dealing with things like, is this your first marriage, a second marriage, et cetera, those blended families can complicate things even further. For instance, when we're talking about access to assets and how monies are going to be handled and spent, or we're talking about healthcare decisions and who is going to make those decisions for you, oftentimes with blended families, this can be a place where issues of family harmony can come up. How do we make sure that we're maintaining the family relationship and yet we're ensuring that what we want to have happen is going to happen if we can't speak for ourselves? So we always want to take a look at the complexity of the family, who the players are, and how we make sure that the framework of the planning is in place to ensure that we have appropriate decision makers in some of the important positions that I'll talk about in a few moments. And certainly, what happens if we become disabled in some way, whether it be a physical disability, whether it be a diagnosis such as dementia, and we lose the ability to be able to manage our own affairs? How do we make sure that we've got the right plan in place? So I'm going to look at a couple of things. I'm going to talk about some of the key documents that we want to make sure are in place: durable power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, a living will, the HIPAA authorization and release form, and I'm going to talk particularly a little bit about trusts and how they work in all of this planning. So, durable power of attorney. This is a very powerful document in which you name somebody to step into your shoes to manage all aspects of decision making for you except healthcare. We often see this document used in the financial world. It's where you're naming what we call your attorney in fact to be able to step forward and manage things like your finances, decisions about your retirement accounts, how they're managed, when a distribution should be made, paying your bills for you. It is a very powerful document that gives the individual, again, of your choice, the ability to step in and handle those decisions on your behalf. Now, there's two types of powers of attorney. There's one that becomes effective the day you sign it. And so this is a power of attorney that, even though you're completely competent and capable of managing things, maybe you just don't want to have to deal with your retirement account manager or, you know, your life insurance company, and you ask your attorney in fact to handle that for you. Now, you're completely capable of being able to make decisions for yourself, but the power of attorney would give them the authority to be able to step forward and manage that for you. The other type of power of attorney is called a springing power of attorney. This is a document that only becomes effective upon your incapacitation or incompetence. So there needs to be some event, and typically that is a declaration by your healthcare provider that you no longer have the capacity to be able to handle your own financial affairs before the document becomes activated. The benefit of the springing power is that if there's no reason for someone to be acting on your behalf, then no one can use that document and be able to move forward and make decisions for you. But it can be difficult, we have found, particularly in this current environment, to be able to get a physician to be willing to certify in writing that you're no longer able to manage your affairs. And so it can become a hurdle. And you have to think about which is the one that is best for you and your situation. But remember, you're asking somebody who you must have full confidence and trust in to step into your shoes to be able to manage a very broad range of decision making, particularly handling finances for you. And so you want to make sure that you think very, carefully about who you're asking to be in this position. Now, one thing to remember about this document, as well as the rest of the documents I'm going to talk about, is that you can revoke it at any time. So if you make a decision that this person is no longer the one that you want as your attorney, in fact, you can revoke the power of attorney. But it can be cumbersome to do so. So for instance, if you've put a power of attorney in place, and you've made a decision at some point in the future that you don't want that person to be your power of attorney any longer, you need to make sure that any financial institutions that you've given a copy of that power of attorney to are notified and they know that you have changed your mind, you have revoked that power of attorney for that particular individual. And so you need to be careful about who you're asking to be in this very important position for you. Now, why do we do this? Why do we give somebody the ability to be able to step into our shoes and be able to make decisions for us in the event we can't do so for ourselves? Well, the reason why is because if we don't determine who we want to be in this important position and we lose our competency or capacity, we have to turn to a court to have a conservator appointed. This is a court-appointed individual. We have to go through a court proceeding to make this happen. And you, as the person who now is no longer competent or capable, is not going to be able to direct who ends up being in that position. And you could end up having somebody acting as your conservator who you otherwise may never have wanted to have in this position. And they then will have the ability to manage your financial affairs and be able to make all of the decisions regarding your financial asset holdings. Now, they will have court oversight, but you're not going to be the one who controls how that all goes. With a durable power of attorney being put in place ahead of time, you're controlling who's in that important position. You're deciding who's going to be able to act on your behalf. And whether it will be something where they can act immediately, which we often see in terms of maybe spouses who name each other, or an older individual who has a trusted, let's say, child who could step into their shoes to be able to manage their affairs for them, or one that requires that springing action and ensures that nobody's able to do anything unless there is a reason a doctor has declared you incompetent or incapacitated. And one thing to remember about a conservatorship proceeding with the courts is they're expensive. It's a court proceeding, and there's cost associated with having to go through that proceeding. Now let's talk about healthcare proxies. A healthcare proxy is specific to Massachusetts, so it's a specific law here in Massachusetts in which we name an individual to step into our shoes to manage healthcare decision-making. It is very much like a power of attorney, but it is limited to healthcare decision-making only. And one of the interesting things about a healthcare proxy is that it is springing by law. And that means that if you're competent and you're capable of making your own healthcare decisions, yours are the decisions that are listened to. The proxy only steps forward when the document has been activated, meaning that a physician or a healthcare provider has now declared that you are no longer able to make healthcare decisions for yourself. One of the things to know about a healthcare proxy is it doesn't tell us anything about you. What it does is it gives authority. So it gives this broad range of authority to the individual of your choosing to be able to make decisions about hospitalization, about whether nursing home placement is appropriate and necessary, about medication use, including oftentimes the use of things like antipsychotic medications, which we often see come into play with diagnoses such as dementia, And so it is a very broad range document that gives a tremendous amount of authority within the healthcare realm. So it's really important when you're making a decision about who should be your healthcare proxy that you choose someone who is going to follow your direction about what you would have want to have done if you were able to speak for yourself. So you've got to have a conversation with this person. You need to give them the framework so that they can understand how to make important healthcare decisions. Because again, remember, this is only going to be activated when you're no longer competent or capable of making decisions for yourself. And this person is going to have to step forward and make decisions in your stead. And so very, very important that you have that conversation with someone about what's important to you, and you make sure that this person is going to be willing to follow that, even if it might not be the decision they would make for themselves, so that they honor your decisions in particularly situations that might involve end of life decision making. Again, a thing to remember about a healthcare proxy, it is revocable by you at any time, even what we call orally. And this is some of the times where we have some litigation or issues that arise around healthcare proxies when someone, even in the kind of end stage, decides they're going to revoke orally that healthcare proxy and no longer ask that person to be in that position. Why do we do healthcare proxies ahead of time? Again, it allows you to choose the person of your choice to be in that important position of making healthcare decisions for you. Hopefully, it also helps you to give them guidance and a framework and how to make those decisions on your behalf. If we don't have a healthcare proxy in place and something happens and you're unable to make your own decisions because you're incompetent or incapacitated, then we have to turn to a court and we have to have a guardian appointed. Very much like the conservator, the guardian now is responsible for healthcare decisions as well as a broad range of other decisions regarding your well-being and your life. And it involves a court proceeding, and you don't have control over who may end up being in that position of the court-appointed guardian. There are times in my practice in which I get appointed as someone's guardian, and I'm now having to step into someone's shoes and make healthcare decisions for them. And this might be a person that I have never met before, and I am trying to make the best decisions for them, but I don't know who they are. I don't know what was important to them during their life and what the framework is that they would like to see followed in healthcare decision making. So critical that you go through the process of naming somebody of your choice and get this document in place. One of the things that we have here in Massachusetts, so I talked about the fact that a healthcare proxy doesn't talk about what's important to you. It just gives authority to the person that you've asked to be in that important decision-making position. So one of the things we have here in Massachusetts is what's called a MOST form. Now, this is not something you do with your attorney, your legal provider. It's something you do with your medical provider. And what a MOST form is, it stands for Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's more akin to what we think of as the DNR order. This is a document that talks about more specifics about whether you want to be resuscitated or not resuscitated, whether you want feeding tubes or not have feeding tubes, whether you want to be hospitalized, not hospitalized. It goes through a much broader range of decision making. And think of it like a prescription. So this is a document that ends up being signed by your physician. And then because it's a medical order, it is a document that can be followed regardless of what situation you might be in. So whether you're at home, whether you might be in a hospital, whether you might be in a skilled nursing facility, et cetera, it is something that can be followed by the healthcare providers and emergency personnel. So oftentimes we'll have someone who is at end stage of life. They have been dealing with an ongoing issue and they want to be at home to die. Well, oftentimes when someone is in that situation and family is there and an event happens, what's the first thing that family usually does? They call 911 because that's what we do. Well, 911 responders, their job is to come and deal with the situation. resuscitate the person oftentimes, hospitalize them, etc., to get them, get them to a hospital for services. When there's a MOLST in place, and if the MOLST directs them, again, with a physician's order, that they're not to rehospitalize, that they're not to perform resuscitation, the emergency responders can follow that. And so it's a really, again, for people who are in certain situations, so people who are oftentimes at end of life, and someone who is of a certain age, and that certain age is very subjective. When is it appropriate to start having these conversations? Is it when someone is in their 80s, someone is in their 90s? It's really the individualized with the individual themselves and their physician. But this is something that you should be talking about with your healthcare provider as to when it would be appropriate to do a MOLST form. And just to add to a little confusion on it, we're moving to what's going to be called a POLST form, POLST, and it's going to be standing for Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And it's going to make us a little bit more uniform with other states in the US. And there's also going to be some added things like a registry so that the POLST form can be registered and more easily accessible. But certainly something that you want to speak about with your healthcare provider. People oftentimes hear about living wills as well. So I talked about the fact that the healthcare proxy is just a document that gives authority to the person of your choosing to make healthcare decisions in your stead, but it doesn't tell us anything about you. Living wills are more of a direction document. They tend to say things like, I want my healthcare needs met, I want to be taken care of, but I don't want extraordinary measures. So certainly if you're someone who does want extraordinary measures, you're not going to put in place a living will. But a living will, one of the things to remember about it is that it's not a legally binding document. It actually is just a document that gives direction to your healthcare proxy and it acts as evidence and support for them in terms of decision making. Ultimately, the healthcare proxy will make the decision and they can override the living will if they believe appropriate. But it does help to provide them with some guidance regarding what your wishes may be. The last healthcare related document is the HIPAA authorization and release form. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was created in the late 1990s and really went into effect in the early 2000s. And most of us are aware of it. We go into the doctor's office and we need to fill out a form and tell them who they can speak with. And can they, back in the day when could they leave a message on an answering machine? Can they call your cell phone? That kind of thing. So in a HIPAA document, you want to think about who do you want to be part of the conversation about your healthcare? Certainly you want your proxy to be someone who is part of that conversation, should they have to step into your shoes to make decisions. But you may have a larger group of people. So you have multiple children and you've chosen one of them to be the proxy, but you want all of them to be part of the conversation about your healthcare should the time come. And so including them on the HIPAA form is something that you want to consider and have that put in place. The last will and testament, again, I'm just going to touch on it, but it's really a document that's going to handle things after your death. And it is something that all of us should have in place because if we don't direct how things are going to be managed after we die, the laws of the Commonwealth are going to take over and decide how things are going to be distributed and who's going to be responsible for managing it. And so having that last will and testament in place will at least make sure that after death, you've been able to identify how you want things to flow and who you want to be managing things. I'm going to talk a little bit about trust because trust can come into play in two areas. One, revocable trusts or revocable trusts, we also call them living trusts, are documents that certainly talk about what you want to have happen to your assets after your death, but they also talk about how assets that are held by the trust should be managed should you become incompetent or incapacitated. So like a power of attorney, when we have a revocable trust and we've moved assets into that trust, so instead of you owning your home, you've moved your home into your revocable trust. And instead of you owning your bank accounts, your savings, your checking, your investment accounts, you've moved those accounts into your revocable trust. While you're alive, they're for you. Those assets are for your needs and they're under your control while you're competent and capable of managing them. And in that revocable trust, you name a successor trustee, someone who can step forward should you no longer be able to manage things for yourself and be able to take over the trust assets and manage them on your behalf for your benefit. And then, of course, after your death, it's going to talk about how those assets should be handled, who they should go to, and who would be responsible for managing that aspect of things. So revocable trusts are, again, another way of, even while you're alive, being able to identify who you want to manage things should you be unable to do so for yourself. And then let me touch on irrevocable trusts, because we oftentimes have clients who will say, I want to protect my assets, my house, let's say. I want to make sure that my house, the value of my house is going to pass on to the next generation. And we use these, and the reason that I talk about this with respect to how things are managed even while you are still alive, is that an irrevocable trust is a great way of being able to protect some value, whether it be the value of a house, whether it be a savings account, investment accounts, from your future needs. So someone who creates an irrevocable trust and funds it with some assets during their life is saying, I don't want the value of those assets to be expended on my future needs if I need long-term care. So it's a great way of potentially protecting those assets to ensure they're going to pass on to the beneficiaries of your choosing. But they come with a large downside. Number one, in order to be able to protect those assets from being spent on your future needs, you no longer get to control those assets. And those assets are not there for you as you age. So let's say you put your house in an irrevocable trust. Now I can make it so that you still get to live and enjoy that house. Nobody can kick you out of it. As I say to my clients all the time, you get the joy of paying all the costs associated with that house while you're doing that. But it makes it so that value is going to be protected should you need something like long-term care in the future. But here's the downside. Let's say, and Michelle was talking about different cost options that were, associated with living options for you, and you wanted to go into a CCRC or you wanted to go into assisted living. The value of that house, because it's now in an irrevocable trust, I think of it like a steel box, is not going to be accessible to you to be used to cover the cost of another living option that you may want to consider. And so an irrevocable trust can be a great way to protect assets, but you really have to understand the downside of them, the loss of control that can come with them, and the fact that those assets are no longer going to be available to you to be able to support your needs as you age. Thank you very much. Chris, back over to you.
Thanks, Kathleen, and both Michelle's for your informative presentations. For our guests watching at home, we hope that our three presenters have given you a lot of food for thought on these complex issues. As I mentioned, we're not allowed to have live questions from the participants, but I do have a number of questions that I'm going to invite the panelists to help us answer. And I think I've got some questions for each of you, but feel free to jump in if you have other comments after we hear the initial answer. So with Medicare, I often hear that vision and dental and some other services are not covered there, and they can be quite expensive. What's the best thing for our clients to do to help address that?
Sure, I
Michelle?
can take that one, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. Original Medicare does not cover routine vision, routine hearing, or basically any dental as well. It also doesn't cover a routine annual physical, which surprises people as well. But in terms of vision, hearing, and dental, there's a couple options for how you could add those on. If you're on the Medicare Advantage plan side, if you're in a Medicare Advantage plan, most likely your plan is going to throw in some of those extra benefits for you, kind of already embedded into your plan. So they might give you a few $1,000s for dental. They might give you an allowance toward eyeglasses every year, every 2 years. They might give you some money towards a hearing aid. So you might be able to access those benefits through Medicare Advantage. If you're on the original Medicare side, it gets a little bit more difficult. As I said, there are some Medigaps that you could add on, and some of those Medigaps have additional riders where you could purchase additional insurance for hearing, vision, and dental. But your options to add those on are going to be a little bit more limited and a little bit more expensive on the original Medicare side.
Great, thanks. And if I'm touring a facility, to consider for assisted living, what are some of the, important questions I should ask of that property manager when we're there? Michelle?
It's my opinion that on a first tour, I wouldn't focus so much on getting your questions answered. I think that it's really important that you use your senses, look around, use your sense of smell, your intuition. Is this somewhere that I can see my loved one living at? Is this somewhere that I would be happy to visit? And then you can get your questions answered. You can always get your questions answered. But if you go in focused on getting your questions answered and it's not a place that you can end up seeing your loved one at anyway, then you spent a lot of time and energy searching for something that you didn't actually even want. And I think that I get asked this a lot about the checklist of things to look for. Part of what we do is coach people around this whole process, but don't go in with a checklist. Research ahead of time and know what you're expecting, but really use your intuition the first time around, and then you can ask all the questions afterwards.
Sounds like good advice there.
Chris,
Any
if I
other-
could just jump in real quick,
Yeah.
and absolutely, I think Michelle's approach is a really good one. But once you've made a decision about where you want to go, understanding clearly about what services are provided and what services are not provided. Assisted livings are very much akin to a landlord-tenant situation in many instances, and sometimes people go in believing that there's going to be a larger breadth of services than are actually provided, or that are being provided for that cost, and that certainly can get additional services, but for additional cost. And so it's really understanding what the contract entails and understanding what the breadth of services are that you're signing up for.
And I just want to bring that back to that slide, to that presentation, that assisted living isn't black and white. There are some assisted living communities that provide really high levels of care, and there are some that don't. And then the care is predicated most of the time on two factors. One is the room and board, and the other is the care. So understanding, one of the most important questions to bring it back to what was asked that somebody can ask is, at what point would my loved one need to move out of this community because of their care needs or because of their the answer is going to be because of their care needs or because of their finances, but how that question is answered does differ from community to community. Thank you, Kathleen.
Another question that we had was, I've done my estate planning. I feel comfortable with it, but I'm moving from Massachusetts to Maine because I like the south coast of Maine. Do I have to redo everything?
So it is, the attorneys always say it depends. So that's actually, so part of it, certainly things like a trust. One of the things that you want to look at with your trust is that when we write a trust here in Massachusetts, there is typically a clause in that trust that talks about the fact that Massachusetts law is going to control that trust. Now, does it mean you have to rewrite the entire trust when you go to another state? Not always, but you are going to have certain aspects of that trust that should be updated to reflect that state, and if you've got property in that state, et cetera, you want to make sure that the trust is going to conform with that state law, because each of the states is going to manage the estate plan differently. Things like durable powers of attorney, those again are not something that's something that, should be acceptable no matter where you are, but each state does have differences in their durable power of attorney acts in terms of what kinds of authority a power of attorney or the attorney in fact has and what they're able to do. And so as much as I would like to say that the plan that you have here should go with you anywhere, truth is that you really should have it looked at based on that new state and talk to an attorney in that state to make sure that you have captured all of the nuances of that particular state. Healthcare decision is very different state to state. We have a proxy here. Other states have healthcare directives in which they're actually written out. And so that is something that you really do want to make sure that you've updated regardless of the state you're living in.
Okay, I think we have one more question. When should we contract with or talk to a funeral home? Should we do that, now when we're healthy and living, or 6 months before we might pass away? Is there a time frame involved? When does a funeral director help out, or can they help out in a lot of these cases?
It is something, as I always say to clients, it's not necessarily a fun way to spend an afternoon. But I think that a couple of reasons why we encourage clients to really consider doing it. Number one, again, you're in control. You're able to decide what you want to have done. And I have clients who have done everything up to deciding what kind of flowers there's going to be, the music, and what the obituary is going to look like. The other thing is I cannot tell you how often when I have a family after a loved one has died, sitting down, and when they talk about the fact that the funeral had already been arranged and taken care of, it's really a gift. It makes it so that it's one less thing for them to have to think about. They've been able to be assured that the funeral went off the way the individual wanted it to happen, and that everything that they wanted to ensure was taken care of was taken care of. It's also a good mass health planning tool. Under the mass health regulations, prepaying for funeral expenses is something that's an allowable spend down of monies.
I also think that it's a good starter of conversation because people don't necessarily want to talk. Well, people don't want to talk about funeral planning, but they don't want to talk about their incapacity. So, but we all know that we're all headed to the same place, and we need to do funeral planning. There's a organization that is really beneficial that I work with called Honoring Choices of Massachusetts, and Honoring Choices sort of encompasses all of this, and including talking points for you and your loved one about the healthcare proxy and the powers of attorney and the living will and the advanced directives and the things like what do you want at your memorial service, and pretty much all of it is encompassed in through that website. It's a great resource we have here in Massachusetts.
Okay, in closing, thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon and listening to our panelists. I hope, if you have questions along these lines, that you are able to reach out through your advisor to contact Shine or Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors or the Generations Law Group. They're all valuable resources for us. If we can assist you with any of your non-financial decisions, it's important for us and your family. We try to bring these topics forward for you. It's nice that we have to let our clients know that they have the financial resources to live to 100, but we also want to provide education on other important decisions that you're going to face during your lifetime. We do have a number of educational guides available on our website at Canby Financial. There should be a URL popping up on the screen to show where that is, but I think you can find it on our website as well. And again, thanks again for attending, and have a great evening.